So we're live. My name is Rod Graham, and this is my YouTube channel, or you may be seeing me on Twitter. And this is another episode in my Being series. And on this episode, I'm speaking with Kristi Winters. Now, for those of you who see this later through the YouTube algorithms, and that's usually how most people see this, I like to explain a little bit of what this Being series is about. So the idea here is that I find interesting people, as Dr. Kristi Winters, hereafter Kristi, is. I find interesting people, and I ask both how they came to be, like who they are, their interests, but also about their opinions on social and cultural issues. And Kristi fits the bill, right? She's very interesting. And there's some things I don't know about Kristi, a lot actually, but there's some things I really want to know. And so hopefully, as we talk, that will come out, and the people who know and love Kristi from Twitter and YouTube will learn a little bit more about her too at the same time. So, Kristi, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. It's really nice to be on.
All right. Well, let's jump right in, and it'll be a back and forth. I'll throw my 2 cents in, but first, let's learn a little bit about you, huh? So, why do you think? And these are questions that just pop in my head. So there's no prior motivations. It's just like, what can I ask a person to get them to say something different? That's all. So that's what these questions are. So why do you think people like Kristi Winters?
So that question actually makes me reflect on the fact that there are kind of two Kristi Winters. Not that I got insofar as there are people who know me in real life and experiencing me sort of 360. And then there are people online who know me as a voice and a face and see, basically what goes online. So I think it might make more sense to answer the second question than the first,
Okay.
because more people will know me through the medium of YouTube or Twitter or Twitch, where I have a show with my friend Kevin Logan, usually on Friday nights, called The Happy Hour. But I think that,
Oh, I didn't know about that. Huh.
oh yes, it's very foul language, and it's mostly a current event show, but we also do some topical things too. So we've started this trend now. Well, I'm getting off topic, so I'll just stay focused. So I'm on Twitch too on Friday nights, Kevin
Yeah,
Logan's
yeah.
channel. And so if you know me from that show, you probably like me because of my banter with Kevin. We have a really good back and forth. There's a lot of sexual innuendo, and there's a lot of laughing. There's a lot of fun stuff. If you come to my channel on YouTube, which I've moved more and more to focusing on social science in recent sort of months.
That's where I know you from. Yeah.
Yeah, what you're going to get there is, I think, I have a very constructivist view toward social things, and that I don't think is often articulated in digital media across various social media and whatnot. And so I think if you're coming to listen to me talk about stuff, it's because you haven't heard about it in that perspective before, or you want to learn about a topic and I do a good intro kind of thing. And if you watch me when I do D&D on Twitch, you're probably there for some fun storytelling. So, and on Twitter, I mostly snark about politics and then end up getting into fights with a lot of trolls. So my
I've
feed's a bit
seen
of a
that. Yeah.
mess. Yeah, yes. I give as good as I get. And it's always a little bit of a satisfactory smile for me when someone comes into my mentions immediately insulting me, and then I bait them and mock them until they end up blocking me. So like they came into my mentions, but then
And
they end up
this is
blocking
fun,
me.
Kristi. This is
Well, yeah, this is for me, it's sparring. Well, at this point too,
uh,
because I've been on YouTube so long and I've dealt
mhm.
with like the Sargon fans and the Bering fans, my armor is thick and my skills are hot. So, like I've got a lot of different weapons to use and a lot of little tricks and reverse psychology and various things that I can do to get usually elicit the reaction I want. So,
Interesting. I like to have like quick back and forths, and then I'm like, okay, well, and then I just kind of move on to the next thread or the next bar or something like that. But yeah, I've never been. Sometimes I get dragged into these long conversations, but I try to these long back and forths. But I try to avoid doing that these days. I don't know what happened. I just lost interest in it. But yeah, I do see you, quote tweeting people and having
yes.
these back and forths. And so, by the way, you have a great voice. Like you have like an NPR
Thank you.
voice.
I have been told that I should do
Yeah.
voice work. Yes. Thank you.
Very, very
Thank you.
soothing, okay.
Late
Yes,
night
yes,
jazz radio station.
yes.
Welcome back to WBAR, playing all the latest smooth jazz.
That's
Something like
it,
that.
that's it.
Yeah.
Right. Either that or, some kind of, R-rated service.
Oh
One
yeah.
of the 2.
I have like
So
a voiceover OnlyFans. Is that what it
yeah,
is?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, now this isn't one of the questions that we kind of prepared for, or I sent you, but I think it's worth asking. So you're doing all this social science.
Mhm.
Are you teaching social science? Are you doing research? Like, what's the background, the
Sure.
educational background?
Not currently teaching social science, but I am doing research because I work at a Leibniz Institute for the social sciences, and publication is part of our jobs. So, in my professional life, I am finalizing a case study on data management of unstructured big data. That's that's the piece
Whoa.
I'm
Okay.
currently finalizing. So like
Sounds
that's
exciting.
yeah, super exciting. Not exciting, will be very useful because data sets are just getting bigger and bigger and harder to manage. And there's a lot of ways you can combine them, but that doesn't mean that they're always ready to use them the way you want. Anyway, but I did teach for, I guess, every year of my PhD, and then I got a postdoctoral fellowship. I won the British Academy postdoctoral fellowship, which is quite prestigious, if I can say so
Mhm.
myself. It's a 3-year postdoc, and for 2 of that, I did 2 of those years before coming to my current position, current company or business archive. And I focused on teaching research methods, quantitative and qualitative research methods, but also taught a bit of British politics and US government as well.
So are you from the UK?
I'm
It
from the
doesn't sound.
States.
Yeah,
I'm
I was
from
gonna say, yeah.
I'm from Wisconsin, don't you know? Yeah, I used to like I grew up in Plover and lived down there in Fond du Lac for a while, and went to University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh.
Aha. Okay,
Oh
okay.
yeah, you betcha. But then I lived in the UK and just listened to the BBC and all my British friends,
Uh-huh,
and
uh-huh.
as a consequence, you end up kind of like picking up new words and you pronounce them in the country that you learn them. So,
Mhm.
faffing about or a lot of other, profane words. So I'm not going to keep going down that list. But yeah, I think my voice modulated to sort of a mid-Atlantic, but it was more, I think, more heavily British when I was living in Britain. But since I've come here, I think it's sort of drifted a little bit more mid-Atlantic. However, when I talk to my British friends, I think I get a bit more of a British accent. And I've been told when I'm on the phone with my family back in Wisconsin, I sound Wisconsin.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I kinda get that. I mean, I think people can detect that I'm from the American South, but it gets even worse if I go home and I stay for a
Yeah.
while. Yeah, so I kind of understand that totally.
Yeah.
Okay, well, many people like Kristi Winters, okay? We know that. We have established that as a fact. But why would people not like Kristi Winters?
Um, well, I guess it depends on who those people are, right? I'm criticized from the left for not being left enough. So, for
Oh,
instance,
my friend.
oh yeah, like unless you're at the extreme, you're going to get it from all directions, no matter
Okay.
where you stand on the political spectrum. So I'm also very pragmatic when it comes to American politics. Is a Democratic Party perfect? No. Is it absolutely the best choice in every single case that you have, in my opinion, that you have an election? Yes. And so for me, I guess, I often kind of, so I don't hold back from criticizing people who tear down the party, because it's without offering like a positive too. If you're just
Mhm,
tearing something down to destroy it, then you're basically working with the Republicans, right? So, in my opinion, you're doing their work
mhm,
for them, but from the other side. So, I think people, the Gvosh has never interacted with me, but he's called me crazy. More misogyny and ableism. So I think from the left, I probably would get that critique. Centrists would probably call me, too left wing and an ideologue, not able to, kind of see both sides of it. And of course, to the right wing, I'm an SJW. feminist, ivory tower, I think Sargon called me, or Carl Benjamin, social scientist who thinks, gender is a construct. All the buzzwords. I'm just trying to fit in a
Hmm.
series of buzzwords here. So I am like, I'm one of the things that they love to hate.
That's interesting. So, I know of, it's weird. I know that Vosh person is a well-known person, but somehow I've never consumed anything from that person.
You're not missing much. If you're not into debate bro culture, especially. But
Not
yeah,
really,
I'm sorry, I
no.
interrupted you. Continue.
No, no, I was done. And
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not into debate bro culture. I like discussions, but I don't need to do all the debating tricks and trying to win an argument and score points and all that stuff. So,
Yeah, that's very much Vosh. I mean, he will try to point score to his own detriment, as we saw recently when he tried to use misogyny in defense of trans people. And then when people told him, people like me, and like, you don't help women when you hurt all women with your misogyny. And he was like, no, no, let me explain to you why I'm right. Like, you're not listening. You're more invested in being right than you are in being an ally. So you're not an ally.
interesting. Okay, all right. I wish I'd have known that beforehand, and I could have looked all that up and kind of
Oh God,
understood.
don't no, don't worry. Like, really, it's not worth it. That's. I mean, if you're interested afterwards, it's entertainment. But I wouldn't want you to do Vosh homework. I wouldn't forgive myself.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Now you are talking, along with other things, social science. So I have here talking all the time, but I mean you have a wide range of interests. So why are you talking about social science so much, Kristi?
Yeah, I don't think that enough people on YouTube are. There's if you want to go and find a series on physics or gravity or the cosmos or chemistry or math, those are really easy to find. If you go to look for some intro stuff on social science, you might get some in Crash Course, but not at the level at which professionals do it. And I think
Mhm.
that that's a big gap. And so being uh, an example of someone who is evidence based and data led, who also values qualitative and quantitative methods, I think that that is really lacking, and that is what I'm. At least on my show, it's kind of taken a turn. My show recently has really started to focus more on social science because I felt like that was a gap that I could fill.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. You know what? I agree with that. I think that we need more social science communicators. For me, what's your discipline?
I got my undergrad in political science. I have my MA in political behavior, and then my PhD is in government, but that was also political behavior.
Okay, okay. So on my end, I think we do need more communicators of social science generally, but for me, it's lacking in sociology,
Hmm.
and it's become more acute over time after the rush of IDW folks who've been throwing so much shade on
Hmm.
social sciences and sociology and the studies departments, and so yeah, there needs to be more people to kind of push back against that.
Hmm. Yeah.
What I found, so I try to do that, and at first I had this kind of mix of social critique and sociology, and the idea was, and I still do that a little, the idea was to apply what I know to the real world. I still do that, but I find that the audience is going to perceive that as just a politicized conversation. So
Mm.
unless you take out all of the real world applications, right, and you just talk about something very banal,
Abstract.
yeah, or abstract, then if you do that, then it's fine because they think you're a teacher. But if you say, well, okay, now if we apply it to
Yeah.
the real world, which I mean, I'm sorry, but sociological research tends to point towards progressive ideas. But anyway, so then people wouldn't respond to the sociology; they respond to the
Mhm.
politics. So what I started doing was just kind of separating platforms. So on my YouTube channel, it's that mix, right? And then when I
Mhm.
really want to dig into the sociology and um, my YouTube channel is a mix, and then my Substack is more towards, okay, I am a sociologist. If I happen to talk about the real world, fine, but I'm just a sociologist. So
Yeah.
in fact, here's a oh no, this is so there's someone in the chat. Uh, Sam C. This person's been with me for a while here. So thanks for commenting again. Anti-woke sociology has been such a grift. I know the anti-woke stuff has been a grift. I didn't know there was a branch or a subset of anti-woke sociology, but whenever I see anti-woke, I do think grift, Sam. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think there the references might be to, the way that people will try to dismiss crime patterns, the obvious racial bias, for instance, in the
Mhm.
justice system. And they'll just say, it's woke. You're to blame it on white supremacy and to blame it on a history of racism and a culture of racism, norms that aren't even spoken about. They're just transmitted through behavior and actions and expectations within an organization like the police,
Mhm.
right? That to point that kind of thing out is to be, oh, you're being woke, as opposed to pointing out a structural process at work every day. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. I mean, that's the way. Like to me, it's a way of saying you're anti something, anti-race, or you're against a certain racial group, or you got some bias against a racial group or sex or gender. But instead of saying that, you can just say, "Oh, I'm just against the woke policies." That's all.
Hmm.
It's this kind of thing. Yeah. So where you are, has that is that a part of? I guess I can ask you about UK political discourse, and then also you're in Germany now. German political discourse is
Less
that
so
happening
because I
there?
don't. I mean, I'm learning German and I'm starting like higher level, but I don't.
Mhm.
I'm not that. I'm not there yet. So let's look into English speaking
Okay.
countries.
All right.
So yeah, British or American. Yeah. You
Okay.
were gonna. I didn't, but I interrupted. So you can finish your sentence. I didn't hear your
Well, I
question.
was going to ask you if so. I mean, here in the U.S., yeah. I mean, now it's almost an expected political tool that people on the right are going to use woke to dismiss stuff
Hmm.
or to slander it. Is that happening in the UK?
Oh yeah, it's definitely being adopted by right wingers, and
Hmm.
it's meant with the same intention, which is to undercut and dismiss basically like the humanity of people who are pointing out injustices in their own societies. And that's
Yeah.
always a very useful tool for people who are benefiting from those unfair advantages and don't want to give them up, is to not debate the topic, is to just demean the person.
Yeah. 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 I see that quite a bit. It's unfortunate. Okay. Um, are studies departments biased? Gender studies, Black studies, Asian studies,
Well, there's also international studies and
That's
other things,
right.
right?
That's right. International studies. Well,
Yeah.
are those departments biased?
Well, I think the question here is when you're talking about the term study, as like
Mhm.
like a Black studies or international race studies, and you kind of like talking about doing social science, because you can study the social world through qualitative methods. For instance, international relations. I will get to your question, but
Mhm.
international relations. When you talk about studying countries, you can't really take a sample of countries and treat them, do experiments to them or survey them, because their cultures are also different. So the sample size is just too small. You can only really do comparative analysis. You can refer to aggregate analysis, but you can't treat countries the way we treat a population, for instance, where we have millions of people or something. Um,
Mhm.
and I think when we talk about internet, a focused program, I don't think. I mean, I don't even the framework of bias. I don't think it's biased to study an understudied phenomenon or an understudied group or a neglected part of history. And that's what I feel that when we talk about African American studies or women's studies or I don't know if there's LGBTQIA studies or queer studies or
Queer
whatever they
studies.
are,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
right? Those are redressing literally the gap in those analyses and looking at those people and those lives since ever, right? That we basically,
Mhm.
those were ignored populations until the 20th century, which means we have more than 20 centuries of history, but we don't know, that no one's looked at, that no one's investigated. And so they're not biased, they're focused, would be my
Okay.
answer.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I'll just play the devil's advocate here and
Yeah.
say, uh, great, they're focused. I'm all for that. But it seems as if all they're doing is looking at they're trying to see inequality, right? They're starting from this Marxist lens of oppressor and oppressed. And so therefore they're finding all these things out. And I mean, you can't trust this stuff. It's just, some ideological, nonsense. It's biased in that way. They're not looking
Yeah.
for the evidence. They're focusing on ideology.
Yeah. The problem with that argument would be, I know you're playing devil's advocate, is that they study oppression because oppression defined those populations. It's why we don't know about them.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you don't understand the structures of oppression and the methods of oppression and maybe resistance to oppression or how oppression adapted itself based on technology or whatever else, you're not going to understand that group. And you're not going to, so you kind of have to start with why they aren't already being studied, which is a system of oppression.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm glad I asked that question because I never would have thought of it that way. I have an answer to that, but it's not.
Yeah.
It wasn't based on the idea that we should study them because they are oppressed, which is true though, or
Yeah.
historically oppressed. I try to draw an analogy because I actually believe that those departments are biased. I do, but
And
I don't
well,
think.
how are you defining biased? Because I think that's a really important thing to establish.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna say it. So
Okay.
I think that they are biased. I think that, but I don't think that bias necessarily corrupts research.
Yeah, that's the
So
question. Yeah.
yeah. So like, I don't know, when John F. Kennedy said we're going to the moon. Well, we directed our efforts towards the study of that, and we kind of,
Yeah.
if you want to think of it this way, biased our research towards getting to the moon. And I think that that's kind of how these things are. You're starting from some notion. Maybe it's the flip of what you're saying. I'm saying that those studies departments are trying to deal with inequality, and so they're biased in
Mhm.
that, yes, they're trying to alleviate those differences between those populations. And so it's biased in that way. But so what? As long as you're using standard ways of
Mhm.
validating your research and making sure your research is reliable, great. You're still coming up with an answer that we can use in the real world.
Yeah. And the other thing is that all like the study of history has always been biased toward, in the West at least, white men. So I mean,
That's true. That's
we
true. And I like reading history, but it's generally the study of great people and white men. Yeah.
yeah. And so I mean, by saying that it's gender studies or African American studies is biased, it's sort of omitting, it's treating the bias toward white men in Western history as natural, as normal. Is that how it's supposed to? That's neutral. And when you go outside of it, but the truth is that is also a bias. So then they're
It
equivalent.
is. It is.
You know.
It might also be that there's this sort of, I don't want to insult people here, but maybe a rudimentary understanding of how the research process works, right? So, they might imagine that, well, you just, you sit down and you ask a question and from thin air, right? You just come up with a question and, all right, I'm going to again pull up data from thin air and I'm going to test my
Yeah.
hypothesis and there you
Oh my
go. And,
gosh, it's a
you
King
know,
Crocoduck Medium article.
Oh, I saw that. I saw that. I didn't listen to that one, but
Yeah,
I
it's
saw that
okay.
you did that live stream. And it's just not how it works. And I don't know if I
No,
want to blame people for that. It might just be our educational system
I
has
think that's the
has
problem.
created that. Yeah, yeah.
I think it is because we're taught the scientific method and process only in natural science classes.
That's right.
And so we don't, through at least high school and even through college, although that's changing, there's more demand for quantitative competencies across the social sciences now. But yeah, you don't understand how to work up a theory in a social field, or how to create a hypothesis, or measurement problems, or why do we use a cutoff of 0.05 and not 0.001. And so as a
Mhm.
consequence, people, they just tend to think that, oh, they're just making it up, or they just take aggregate data and they draw inferences from that, I think.
Right. Yeah, yeah. That's my view. It's one that I've come to realize over time because I couldn't figure out, like,
Mhm.
why are these people imagining that social scientists just sit around in a coffee shop and just, make up stuff and that's it. That's just not how it works. A lot of hard work goes into that stuff in the studies departments as well, like
Oh,
all
yeah.
across the social sciences.
You
So
have to be very knowledgeable of the literature and the various arguments and the critics of
mhm.
various things and demonstrate that in your work. You can't just like make up a definition and then treat it like we should all take it seriously.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree. Well, you mentioned that. So what was that article about? Crocodunk?
King Crocoduck. He started off, I think, mostly bashing creationists on YouTube, but then he just
Okay.
kind of decided, like, the whole social constructionist movement was bad, and so he doesn't like me. Another example of a right winger who doesn't like me. And his article, it was called Woke Ideology, and he basically just like he was writing as if he was making a serious argument, but then he didn't do any of the real work you need to make the serious argument. You just
Hmm.
kind of said, "Oh, I am defining woke ideology as blah 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 blah." I'm like, "No, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. You don't just get to make up a definition and then just use it for your whole article and expect me to take you seriously. Go
Hmm.
read what, like, so now that you could, yeah. So anyway,
Yeah, you
that's
have to ground your definitions in what has come before and link it to those things. And
hmm
yeah, so I don't know. This whole woke ideology thing is crazy. On the one hand, so if I put my social scientist hat on, I will say, okay, maybe there are some people in the Western world that you can put in a bin, and you can say, okay, what are their values and beliefs? And from that, we can extrapolate some sort of patterns and say, okay, more or less, this would define a person who has um, a very high interest in dealing with depression, right? You know, that would be something that I could see as what they want to call woke, I guess, and woke ideology or wokeism. I can see that sort of approach, but that's not what you get. Like you get these sort of like armchair philosophies, people kind of sitting around and saying, well, wokeism is this, wokeism is a religion. I've heard that all the time. And
yeah.
I mean, it's like, come on, these are the same people who are complaining about social science being biased or not scientific, and you're trying to give me this. I mean, check yourself at the door. But
Lots of cognitive dissonance.
yeah, yeah,
It's, yeah. Yeah, I think the whole term has been basically, Chris Rufo laid it out. He wanted to appropriate the term and basically turn it into whatever the, evil person of the week was. And that has been their right wing agenda, for not probably before Rufo, but he made the mistake of saying the quiet part out loud on Twitter. So,
yeah. The famous tweet that everyone quote tweets and screenshot it and
hmm
saves and they use it
yeah,
in so many articles because yeah, I mean, he just kind of put it all out there. He said the quiet part out loud. So
yeah.
yeah,
It's revealing to me that they can't have honest debates. It's James Lindsay's misunderstanding of so many philosophers pains me so deeply because you know I said this on Twitter. I'm quoting Bertrand Russell, but whenever I hear James Lindsay, I think of Bertrand Russell's quote: "Never trust a stupid man's report of what a clever man says,"
oh,
because he must unconsciously translate everything he hears into something he can understand.
huh. So I would not consider that person
So James
unintelligent,
Lindsay,
actually.
no, so James Lindsay is like taking Marcuse
Hmm.
and not reading any of the commentaries, not trying to like understand the larger body of work. He's just sort of sitting down and reading it through his lens of
Oh yes,
this
okay, I see
person,
what you're saying. Uh-huh.
right? And so he then is trying to interpret not Marcuse, but his reconstruction straw man version of it that fits within his grand narrative, because he's not a postmodernist. There's a big grand narrative of conspiracies going all the way back to Kant, apparently. So
Yeah,
anyway, we're off on a tangent now. I forgot what the main question
that,
was,
that's
but
that's fine because I mean so that's going to appeal that sort of it's sophomore. So sophomore is like wise fool, right? Isn't that what it means? It comes from Latin. So it's a
mm,
sophomoric way of understanding these issues. It looks like it has a patina of intelligence, and
yes,
then you go
yes.
underneath, and it's like, but that will
Mm,
appeal to a lot of people. It really
sadly,
will.
yeah.
I remember grievance studies hoax. Him and Pluck Rose and what's the other guy?
Was it
Bogosian?
Bogosian?
Yeah,
Bogosian?
that's
Peter
him. Yeah,
Bogosian?
when
Yeah.
when they did that, people in the social sciences could immediately see the flaws in that and they go, well, come on, that's not really telling us much about the
Mhm.
quality of those journals. I mean, look at the acceptance rate. They made up stuff. I mean, of course, you start from this idea that the person is working in good faith, so you're going to take it, based on that. So they kind of took advantage of that system, and so, you know, this is not much here. But someone who's not in academia or
Yeah.
someone who doesn't like what's happening in academia, so it could be academics too, they'll take that and they'll go, well, you see, there you go.
Mhm.
All
The
of these
whole
disciplines,
field.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
What
that kind of stuff appeals, yeah.
One of the things that I don't think it's mentioned enough or at all, having gone through the peer review process, right? Those grievance studies articles got rejected a couple times, from
Yes,
my
yes.
understanding, right?
Uh-huh.
And every time you get a peer review, you get comments on how to make your article better, right? So what if
Mhm.
they took actual legitimate like academics who are in good faith trying to give them a better paper and used all of their arguments on their crappy paper that got rejected. So they're not actually presenting their paper. They're freeloading off of other people's work who are trying to be charitable to them and then using it to stab them in the back.
Yeah, I mean, that was just messy. I never thought of it that way. I was just going on the fact that they were lying, but that's
Yeah.
even worse what you're saying. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just really a bad business all the way around, and people will.
It's not honest, yeah.
It, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very unfortunate,
And
but
it's and the other thing too, and this is really important, and Peter Boghossian got in a lot of trouble for this. They did not register this as a study. They claimed it was the grievance studies papers, right?
Mhm.
But they did not file the paperwork to do research on this. And that means Peter Boghossian violated his ethical responsibility to declare that he was basically lying to the participants in his experiment. Because when you submit a study and you're dealing with
Mhm.
human beings, you have to go, if you're in a university position, faculty, you have to go through an ethics review by your peers. You have to
That's right.
lay out a confidentiality, data protection. Are you going to use deception? Are you going to harm your participants? Right. And not only did they deceive their participants, like you would in an experiment where people go in and they think, oh, I'm going to be tested on X, but you're really looking at them in situation Y. They extracted labor from those people. They wasted their time. And they never declared it was an experiment. They never compensated them for their work. They just relied on that goodwill. And yeah, he got in trouble at his university for violating his ethical obligations in getting a review, because if he had put that before members of his faculty, they would not have let him do it. It's unethical what they did by
Mhm.
the standards of research ethics.
Yeah, yeah. It's really something. I didn't pick up on that at the beginning. I wrote a piece on this, but it was more about the politics of it and whatnot. But I didn't
Mm.
pick up on the fact that, yeah, he needed to submit that through the institutional review board, and he didn't
He
do it.
should have, and he didn't do it. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then,
Mhm.
of course, Pluckrose and Lindsay are. I'm not sure what happens to co-authors who are independent, but I guess
They
I
don't,
don't know.
yeah. It's the person who ultimately has that responsibility was Boghossian, and he
Mhm.
failed.
Okay. Well, since we're on the IDW anti-woke crowd,
Okay.
right? Nice segue here.
Yeah.
You say Jordan Peterson doesn't understand social science.
Yes.
Now, I do not agree with this. So I need to
Okay.
know, what do you mean?
Well, maybe it might make more sense if you tell me why you think he does. And then
Mhm.
we will, because if I just go more broadly, I might not reach your point. So I'm going to defer to you. I'll let you make the affirmative why Jordan Peterson does understand social science.
Okay. So I have a lot of faith in the scientific community and educational institutions. Not complete faith, but I have a lot. And so if someone is able to navigate the PhD process, um, getting tenure, wasn't he tenured at Harvard? I know he was
No,
there.
Harvard, it was, I don't know about
He's,
Harvard. I know he ended up in
uh,
Toronto, I think.
yeah, he got tenured at, which isn't it the most elite school in Canada? So if you can, it's not. I think it is. It's one of the top schools in Canada. So he gets
Very
tenured there
possibly, yeah.
as a social scientist, yeah, in psychology.
Well, yeah, he gets tenured in psychology. That doesn't make him a social scientist.
So maybe that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Because when I saw that, I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, you getting all these grants and you get tenure and all that stuff. You gotta know, you gotta understand something.
Yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're being scientific.
Okay, so tell me what's up. What's going on with Jordan
So
Peterson?
I think that's I kind of why I like the division between like political studies of things like international relations or African American studies. Again, you can't. It's not that they're not quantitative. They don't use quants, but you can do more. There's more openness to ethnography and interviews, other qualitative methods, right? Because you're looking at people's lived experiences. For me,
Mhm.
social science is very much about having a clear understanding of the scientific method and that theories are causal mechanisms that are a series of interconnected
Huh.
statements of phenomenon that attempt to explain an interaction we observe in the world, right? You have to have hypotheses and you have to operationalize. So, I mean, I think of it, social science to me is like saying natural science. It's the science part there that really separates it in that way. And Jordan Peterson might be really good at Jungian ideas. He might be really good at like his favorite author is Solzhenitsyn or Dostoevsky, right? He might know the concepts of that. He might have read Nietzsche. But I'm telling you, when I looked at his mind maps in his book,
Okay, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen
okay,
that.
it's basically this diagram that is a mess. Like he doesn't think scientifically. It would be like he doesn't hold himself to that scientific standard, I would say. So he can be in psychology and understand a lot of things, but not necessarily know how to do an ordinary least squares regression, to not understand the
Mhm.
role of, like cutoff points of 7.7 or higher in a factor analysis or principal components
Mhm.
analysis. For me, that's social science. If you're focusing on multi-level modeling, or you're doing structural equation modeling, or you're doing regression analysis or time series analysis or Panadata, that is social science. If you're pontificating on Jungian concepts, you're doing studies.
That's interesting. I don't know if I okay. Both of us may be working from a lack of knowledge about Jordan Peterson, or I may have some components and you have others. I mean, we put it together, we get a better picture. But my thought was that, or my understanding was that, okay, he's in this psychology department and he's getting research funding each year. He made a big deal about
Mhm.
losing his funding because he's now anti-woke or something like that before
Yeah.
he left the school. And so he's doing like some kind of studies in a lab, I was assuming. So
Mhm.
you know, that's what I was under the impression of, but obviously I was wrong because you can get
Okay.
research study money without actually doing like working in the lab or
Mhm.
testing things.
Or
So
providing a new data set, yeah, you can get
yeah,
money
yeah.
for, like, I know in one of our departments, Tony King, very famous member of faculty at the University of Essex, was on the BBC on election nights back in the '70s and stuff. The ESRC, like, threw £100,000 at him to just go talk to media people and politicians about an idea he had about, why policies collapse. He ended up spending it, like, whining and it was it should probably be talking about this. Yeah, I mean, so he just went and, he did research, and
Uh-huh.
he collected it, but it was a bunch of people's, like, personal first-hand accounts, and he was doing sort of modern political history. There's no
Okay.
science in
So
there?
now okay, so oh fine. I understand what you're saying now.
Okay.
Okay. Now, but I still now I have a different axes of disagreement.
Oh,
Okay.
okay,
So it has to
fun.
do with I don't see social science as needing as a necessary condition hypothesis. I think or data sets. I think we can do qualitative research and it still be science.
Okay, so then epistemologically, we disagree, and I would say that, if I can do you wanna finish? I don't wanna stop you if you're not done.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
it's just
Okay,
that now.
okay.
Well, okay, yeah. So I'm not done. So let me just add
Yes.
a little bit. I guess I have a broader understanding of science where it's just understanding our social world and trying to explain it. And how we do that explanation could be through quantitative or qualitative methods. We hope to predict, that would be nice, but in social science, it seems like because it's so complex and we don't have the tools, we tend to focus a lot more on explanations, which doesn't require numbers.
Okay. And that was Finn. Scene.
I'm done. Okay, so tell me why
No,
I'm
no,
wrong.
no.
Go
Okay.
ahead. Tell me why.
Well, no. So remember, I'm coming at this from someone who had to teach research methods, and I
Uh-huh.
taught both quants and qual. In fact, some of my students sat in on both lectures at the same time because they were doing a research methods heavy master's degree, right? So they saw me a lot, and I couldn't, and so I had to well, I worked from a syllabus that was, I think, eventually stretched out to be 20 weeks long for each course. Okay, so in Germany, or in German, there's the term Wissenschaft, which really means more like knowledge. And this is what you're getting at, right? This sort of knowledge construction, knowledge generation, right? Like social science, people who study the social world are like spiders, and we're sort of spinning out webs, we're constantly spinning out new knowledge out of our bodies, right? And all of it is, and what we observe is data. People are data. What they do, think, and say is data. How we record that is empirically based. It's grounded in an empiricist epistemology, and both qualitative and quantitative play an incredibly important role to knowledge generation, because we look at the qualitative, and from observing, we see patterns or factuals, and from that we generate theories inductively. And then we formulate those theories to be more general in order to test it, whether or not this thing we observed in the micro level will explain phenomena on the macro level. So we get some rules about how it works. We define our concepts. We operationalize what we think they would be in the world, and we go out and measure it. And then we go over here and we get a sample if we want to do generalizable work, right? If we're doing experimental work, it's a completely different track, but just stick with me. So we're going to do survey work here. And we gather data in order to test this theory, and we test it with mathematics, and we all agree on what the rules are. So if a number reaches a certain level, we all agree that this is now a fact, and that's the scientific consensus, right? But then we'll get some outliers, or things won't quite match up to the theory, so we go back to qualitative. And so I don't think I'm degrading qualitative research by saying it's not scientific. I'm trying to be more precise in defining social research that is produced by that mathematical scientific process, and the one that is based in understanding people as real people, which I think is incredibly valuable, which is constructivist in nature and looks to understand the experience of human life through the lived experiences of human beings, which is something that like data can't do. So I'm not, so I would call those studies, like I founded the qualitative elections study of Britain, and I ran it for like 10 years. But it wasn't the qualitative election science of Britain, because I do the science with quantitative data.
Okay, so what if I decide tomorrow that I want to study new migrants to my area of the country, and so which is in Southern Virginia, and so over the span of 4 or 5 years, I go and I talk to those folks. I collect. I see that as empirical data, even though it's in words. So I collect it and I write it down and everything. And then after about 5 years of looking at, let's say, 5 or 6 different communities, I say, look at this. I'm noticing these specific things, these 5 factors that explain what's going on here. And so now I have Rod's theory of immigration to Virginia. That's not science?
It is part of the scientific process in that it's part of the theory generation process. So I would say it's part of the scientific method. But I think when science, to me, really, for me personally, is defined by its quantitative, empirical, deductive nature. So I did the same thing, like with my QESB study, we identified patterns that we found in the focus groups. And from that, we like pulled out something and we generated a description of the phenomenon we thought we were seeing. But that's like, then you pass the ball. So I think it's for me, again, I'm coming from a lecturer's point of view. I had to explain like why the difference between quants and qual. And
Mhm.
the way that I kind of landed on this is studies versus science. And science is like the natural sciences, the quantsy stuff, and theory generation, which you can't do the quants without theory.
Mhm.
That's the studies part of it.
Okay, fair enough. Now, you are a self-proclaimed nerd.
Oh yeah,
All right. Now, I would like to think that I'm a nerd too, but it seems like
you
I
are
am. Okay.
together.
We are nerds together. Good. What makes you so nerdy?
uh, Probably the fact that I constantly find myself pulled toward things that are mentally stimulating to me. So I get pleasure from working my brain, whether that's like watching a murder mystery or something, and like the
Mhm.
whodunit element, or just getting interested. Like I got interested in poker, so for a while I just kind of went on a poker thing, and I just like watched a lot of poker, and I played some poker, and I got better at poker, and then I'll move on to watching restoration videos, or I'll get fascinated with watching interrogations to understand how police manipulate you in the interrogation room. So if I ever end up there, I don't fall for that shit. Um, and so I think it's that sort of like, could you just relax? That might kind of put me in that nerdy category, and my brain just doesn't like to relax.
Okay. Well, you have hobbies?
Well, yeah, YouTubing, especially in Corona Zeit, in Corona time.
Yep, yep, yep.
It's been a lot of online hobbies. So Dungeons and Dragons, which is also very nerdy. I really have been enjoying my time with my online friends doing that.
It is the paradigmatic example of a nerd.
Yes,
It's someone
yes.
who's
Like
playing.
I
I've never
literally
played it, by the way, but
Oh
I've heard
gosh!
people
Oh my
mention a
god!
lot.
I'd love to like see. I mean, next to my bed, I've got D&D books. I'll run a game
Nerd.
sometime. I'd love to get some noobs in. It'd be fun.
I don't know if I want to play like that's like people in a cave looking at drawings and finding entertainment from that. I need something digital at this
Hey,
point.
okay, well, okay. So you want to do some right now? We do a little role playing right now.
Okay.
All right.
I
So
don't
you're
know.
just gonna.
A
All right.
little hesitant, but all right, sure. Let's go
Okay.
for it.
Uh, you find yourself in a wood, very thick, very dense. Although the path that you're on is well trodden and lies out before you. It's
Okay.
summertime. The sun is in the sky, although with the shade of the trees, it's not on burning your skin or warm on you. And there are flowers along the path that you're enjoying when suddenly you hear, coming far from the distance, what you think might be a cry or a bird, but it just doesn't sound natural. What do you do?
That's it? That's all I
Now,
have? Well,
now,
I'm
yeah,
curious.
yes.
I want to know
Mhm.
what's going on there. Yeah.
All right. So, how would you like to figure out what's going on? Would you like to walk into the woods,
Oh, I see.
or
Yeah, yeah. I would like to walk into the woods and towards the direction of the sound and see what's going on. Yeah.
all right? So you could tell that it was somewhere to your back and right, and so you turn to go off the path. Now the grasses are rubbing up against your ankles and up to your mid shin, and you're hoping there's no thistle or anything poison ivy in the woods.
Yeah, we don't want that.
And
No.
no, it's quite thick. You sort of push your way in. And eventually, there's a little bit of a clearing. And in that clearing, you see what looks like a little fairy that is caught in a magical cage. What do you do?
Well, I mean, it seems kind of bad that the fairy's in the cage, so I want to open the cage, let the fairy out.
All right. As you step forward, and now here I would probably have you roll a perception roll to dice to see how you do. I have dice. See, I am a
I,
nerd.
I can't believe I'm being sucked into this.
It's improvisational group storytelling,
Yeah, I
ultimately
see.
what it is. Yeah. And so my job as a dungeon master is to kind of build the world, and your job as a character is to run around and play in it. All right. So I will roll on your behalf. We're going to give you on a perception, we'll give you a +6. We'll just say that
Okay.
you're pretty perceptive. So, you got a 19. +6 is a 25. As you start to step into the clearing, you can see the fairy has noticed you, and she stands up in her cage in alarm. And out of the corner of your eye, with your very intense perception, you see a dark shape that is moving kind of on near the edge of the clearing, but farther along to your left, about 30 feet. What do you do?
This has no rules. This is crazy. Like,
Exactly.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, I can do anything I want. I
You
mean,
can do
what's the
anything you want. Yes, that's the point.
Ow. I mean, if I can fly, then I don't like that thing, so I'll grab the
Okay.
ferry and fly. Can I
All
do
right.
that,
So
or like, do I
so
have
let's say
abilities? This
let's
kind of
say
stuff.
yeah. You can be a tiefling. They are like a winged creature in Dungeons and
I see.
Dragons.
So who was I then?
Well, I mean, I was just planning having you play you, but now
Uh,
I'm retconning this.
no, no, no.
So
Okay,
that
fine. I can't
okay, if you
fly,
want to,
so
okay.
I'll just play me. So,
In the game, you'd pick
but
a character that has different abilities and stuff, and so that would feed into what you do. But yes, but for now, we're just having you be you. Okay.
okay. Well, I think I'm afraid of blobs, kind of. So I'm gonna grab that. I want to take the whole cage. So if I haven't opened the cage yet, I just want to take the whole cage and run in the opposite direction.
Okay, so I kind of had you in my mind, because we don't have a map here, but I had you at kind of the edge of the clearing in this thing over
Oh, I see. So I was
this side.
pinned
That's
in.
okay. But if you wanted to make a dash across the field and try to grab the cage as you go along, you could do that,
Yeah, I want to do that. I
right?
want to make that dash. Yeah.
All right. So you kind of like very quietly, sort of
Okay.
stealthily, kind of move back a little bit to get a bit of a head start. And let's see, I'm going to have you make an athletics check to see how quickly and agilely. You can either roll athletics or acrobatics. And I don't know, do you think you're more, personally, you're more like built for speed, or are you like jump flippy kind of?
I'm built for speed. I don't think I could do
Okay,
many jump flips.
athletics. We'll roll
Okay,
athletics.
yeah,
Okay,
we'll
we'll give
do the
you
athletics.
a +4 on your athletics, to
Yeah, all
say.
right. Sounds about
Oh, I say
average
you're
or
rolling
below
really well.
average.
You
I
got a
don't know.
16, which is a
Okay.
20. All right, so now let me roll for your opponent.
Oh, because he might catch me.
Mm-hmm. All right. You make your move. You dash out from the edge of the clearing into the open light of the field, heading straight for the fairy in the cage. In the back of out of the side of your eye, you can see that the creature, whatever it was that was in the cage, also springs into action. But it's about a half a step behind you, and you're just moving a little bit faster. So you manage to get over to the cage, scoop it up, and make your way back into the more dense forest that's lying ahead of you. What would you like to do?
Um, all right. Now I would like to open that cage.
All right.
Yeah.
So you look down, and the cage itself is glowing with magic. And the fairy inside, she can't quite talk. She's sort of trapped inside. It seems like soundproof or whatever. But
Okay.
she's
Okay.
pointing at she's pointing at the bottom of her cage, not at the lock. She's pointing at the bottom of the cage.
Hmm. That's interesting. Why would she do that? Um. So I'm supposed to do something now,
Mm-hmm.
but you haven't given me. I mean, I get it. There's something going on with the bottom of the cage, but I don't know. Uh. Okay. I want to hit the bottom of the. I want to pull on the bottom of the cage.
All right.
Maybe that's a way of opening it.
Yeah. Another thing that you could do in Dungeons and Dragons is investigate. You could just like,
Oh.
but that's okay. It's fine. You reach underneath, and you feel the bottom of the cage isn't smooth. It's got kind of like a rough edge, and then as you slide your hand over it, you feel a bump that's definitely protruding from the bottom of the cage in a small circle, almost like a button.
I wanna push the button.
All right, you push the button, the
Uh-huh.
cage flies open,
All
and
right,
at
that's what I
that
wanted to do.
moment, the creature that was behind you, you can feel its shadow starting to fall over your head when the fairy flies out of the cage and casts a spell. From her fingers, a lightning bolt shines and streaks and flashes right into the chest of what is a werebear that has been stalking you in the forest. And after she sizzles the werebear, she turns to you and says, "Thank you so much for freeing me. My name is Ariel. Why not?
Yeah, why
And
not?
I know that you've already done so much, but would you escort me to my Fey village to make sure that I'm not kidnapped again?"
Hmm. I would escort that person because they killed the werebear.
Excellent. Well, now, see?
Okay, I see. Now I don't know. Okay, there are two things I want to say. Right. The first is I can see some kind of erotic version of this game.
Yeah, that's why we have lines and veils. Like, it happens, but at like PG-13 in our group. We're like, you can
Okay,
kiss and like
okay.
you roll a performance to see how it went.
Uh-huh.
And if you score high, it was a really good night. And if your performance roll is really low, you didn't do so well.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, then that kind of answers because the second thing would be like if it's not there, then it should be made. It should be automated, and you should do all the voice for it. So I
Thanks.
don't know, Christy. This isn't really my thing, but I
Now you know
mean,
what it's like.
yes, I do. I mean, in some ways, I've got some experience. I used to play Final Fantasy when I was younger, and
Mhm.
this isn't exactly like that, but it's in that genre, right? A little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah,
So
the fantasy genre and
yeah. So
whatnot. Yeah.
okay, Christy, this has been fun, and I'm
Yes, it
I'm
has
glad
been.
that
Thank you.
we spoke, and I learned a lot actually,
Me too.
and it's good to hear your perspective. So thank you very much. Well, what's next for before we sign off? What's next for you?
Yes, I don't know if it's up yet, but I am going to appear on Steve Shive's channel with a friend of mine who does short films, James Mansell. We're just going to talk nerdy cinema stuff. And
Okay.
then on Twitch, on KF Logan 1875, I think it is, the happy hour. I'll be there on Friday nights usually. And Saturday night D&D on Rolling Left, as well as my game that I run on Sundays. So I'm terminally online. And of course my Sunday show on my YouTube channel and Twitter. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. So basically, we can find you almost everywhere. It
Pretty
seems.
much, yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Christy.
Thank you.